Good day, boys and girls. Welcome back to another episode of the Grappling Growth podcast with me, Joe Testouri, and my co-host, Erald Krasniqi. Erald, how you doing today?
Very well, Joe. Thanks for introing. I have had quite a good day so far, I must say. It's Tuesday here in the UK, and it's been a very busy week for myself. Just to let sort of the audience know what's been going on, I've had a lot of work with a couple of clients in a very particular niche, which is very difficult. And I'd love to talk about this niche in more detail sometime. But yeah, an overload of, it's the summer. Some clients are quieter than others, let's say. The seasons have affected a lot, and I'm sure we'll go into a lot of that this episode. But it's been, yeah, pretty hectic for me. How about yourself, Joe?
I've been well, thank you. And we'll get on to your weekend in a bit because that pertains to our questions. For myself, I am in a place just east of Hiroshima. So
Mm.
been traveling Japan now for the last 2.5 weeks, which has been incredible. For anyone who hasn't been to Japan, I would honestly put that in my top 5 countries in the world, and I've been some pretty cool places.
Mm.
Heading back off to Tokyo in a couple of days' time, which should be great. Spent some time in Tokyo a few weeks ago. The food was good. The environment, the atmosphere is fantastic. Such a vibrant city. Uh, Definitely a place that I would actually consider living in for a prolonged period of time, say 6 months or so. So anyone who is thinking of Japan, I would massively recommend it. And for anyone who has been to Japan, let us know in the comments what were your thoughts about Japan. I haven't spoken to anyone who hasn't had great words to say about Japan. So yeah, I'm buzzing. I'm feeling good. And to kind of kick things off, this was a concept or topic which we were discussing, and
Yeah.
the big talk of this weekend has been Barbenheimer, Barbie movie, Oppenheimer. Erald, I haven't watched either of those movies. So if you were the admin of Rotten Tomato, first off, what
Yeah.
would you give Barbie as a score, and what would you give Oppenheimer as a score?
Great question. So I did actually watch both of them this weekend, and very different films, if the trailers wouldn't indicate as such. I mean, Oppenheimer, I. So this is a bit embarrassing. I'd heard the name. I had no idea what the movie was about going into the cinema. I was like, Oppenheimer had. I'm not sure. I didn't check. I didn't watch the trailer. I didn't read a blurb or anything like that. I just went into it, and then as I was watching it, I was like, oh, they're talking about the father of the atomic bomb, which is crazy. And then you've got Barbie, which is very far removed from atomic bombs or any sort of science. Is a much more, well, I guess, aimed at a different audience, but very different. However, for my own personal taste, I'd give Oppenheimer, I'd say like an 82%. You know what I mean? Like 8 out of 10. It was very long, 3 hours long. So you really have to stay tuned in. And it's very dialogue heavy as well. So people that like films with a bit more action might be slightly bored. I felt myself, even me, being interested in it, falling asleep at some point. Barbie, I'd have to give like a 23% or something. It wasn't. I'm not the target audience, so I'm biased, but it was probably aimed more towards a a younger audience, let's say, and someone that's probably more interested in Barbie than I am. But my partner liked it, so maybe should give a different response. I'd be interested to hear what you think, Joe, when eventually you go to see them.
Well, plural intends that I'll be seeing both, which I don't think I'll be intending to see both. I think Oppenheimer is on the list,
Nice.
which is quite befitting, as though it's a movie which has Hiroshima featured in. So that'd be interesting. But
Mm.
not to bore the viewers with regards to what we think about the movies, why we want to bring up these concepts or these movies is because we want to talk more about the commercial side of things. So
Yeah.
just some research, what we've looked into. Barbie opening gates, $182 million opening weekend gate. And then global sales were topping 337 million sales. I'm not in that audience, but evidently, and you're
Yep.
not, but the audience has spoken, and there's probably going to be a sequel. The One of the presidents of Warner Bros. Actually said, we have a pink unicorn. And
Mm.
they estimated they would be looking to make $75 million for their opening weekend. However, $155 million. So sorry, that's 155 million in the US is what they achieved. So they more than doubled
Amazing.
their estimations. What do you think you can put down that success to if you were to objectively look at that, Erald?
Honestly, I think number one, brand hits hard with these sorts of movies. Any movie that's based on a well recognized brand will probably have some sort of buzz. That doesn't guarantee great performance, but if you look at the way Hollywood's gone recently with like re-releases of like the Ghostbusters, or I saw a trailer for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for example, a brand that's like, you know, very well loved and revered. Nostalgia hits hard with a lot of these products and brands. So I think that really helped. The marketing that they did for this movie, I thought was quite exceptional actually. Across the UK, I saw a ton of like billboard advertising, very unique, like the Barbie boxes that people could like use to take pictures in. A lot of social media buzz that was like flooding it, and incredible firepower in the movie as well. I mean, they had obviously like Margot Robbie. I saw, not to get the films mixed up because I did see a lot of like big players in both movies, but the Ryan Gosling, obviously, the guy that plays. I know him from Superbad. I don't actually know his real name, but he's also quite a big actor too. So the firepower, the marketing, the brand behind it, and I also think the thing that they didn't consider, which is probably what took them from that 75 to 155 million, was slightly some controversy about the film as well. So the controversial uh, angles that they were taking with the way they were presenting Barbie and the kind of topics that they were discussing in it, because whilst it was aimed at a younger audience, don't get me wrong, the kind of overarching social commentary in Barbie was actually quite interesting for me, and that was one thing that kind of caught me. You know, the description of how women are seen in society, how difficult it is to break through a patriarchy. These sorts of elements actually, I think, started a lot of the conversation, which brought a lot of people to the movie to begin with. And trust me, every cinema that I saw, getting tickets was tough. It was packed out, so it worked.
Interesting. I think one point that you focused on there was talking about they've already had a brand, and one big proponent of growth that we've looked at with a lot of our clients combined is focusing on building an audience. Now, time and
Mm,
time again, we see influencers, really famous agency in the UK, Genflow, they've got offices all throughout the world. They partner with influencers from Iman Ghazi to Mike Thurston to Grace Fit. And what they specialize in is building audiences first. And this is something that we incessantly talk to our own clients about and anyone
yeah.
that we work with is if you have an audience first, that gives you the platform. And in marketing realms, that would be essentially having a platform to retarget people. And one point that I look at and a piece of research that I looked into prior was something called a viral coefficient. So a
Mm,
viral coefficient is it can range from zero all the way to infinite. And if you have a viral coefficient of one, it means if I was going to watch Barbie and I brought you along, then we'd have a viral coefficient of one. However, let's just say target audience is a group of teenage girls, and
mm,
they were one knew about the Barbie movie, and they said, "Hey," which is always the case with movies.
yep.
Rarely do you see a case where people go to movies by themselves. So I think the net positive impact and the social buzz around it, just on a word of mouth basis, if you could imagine, let's just say, girls in year 10 and they wanted to go watch it. Well, if you weren't someone who went to watch that movie, you'd be out of the know. So you're forced, whether you like it or not, most likely,
Mm,
to go and watch that movie, unless you're a rebel, really. And that's where I think the viral coefficient comes in. So the
yeah.
coefficient is below, say, 1, then it means for every 10 people, let's just say it's 0.1, for every 10 people go to watch the movie, only one person was referred onto it. But the viral
Yeah.
coefficient is probably in the realms of 5 to 10.
That's an interesting point. The thing as well is considering that because we talked about the brand being important and the viral coefficient of Barbie and like kind of the elements you've mentioned about how that viral coefficient increases. With Oppenheimer, it's slightly different, right? Oppenheimer isn't a brand, really. He was a scientist many centuries, decades ago, that built something that ended up being catastrophic from a humanitarian point of view, but revolutionary from a scientific and I guess military point of view. Now,
Mm-hmm.
how many people would you say are actively talking about or have a, some sort of nostalgia to the atomic bomb? I think if they do, then unfortunately it's for very sad, tragic reasons of being around when this actually happened back in the mid
1945.
'40s. Yeah,
Yep.
but the rest of it was people that didn't know about it learning about it and then talking to their
Mhm.
friends about it as well. So like the viral coefficient in that aspect, aside from brand is like they've told an amazing story about something that actually is very hard hitting, which I think also plays a part as well.
But equally, and you had an interesting point onto this, is that it is the model in the way how movies make their money and how they monetize their system of cinemas and how
Mm,
everything's structured there. And I think while they don't have the brand per se, they do have the brand from actors. They had
yeah,
Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon in that movie. Straight
yeah,
away, you've
yeah,
got two of the biggest actors in Hollywood there, which The Rock could promote the worst movie ever, and just because The Rock's name is there, people go to watch it. But just talking about the point that I just previously mentioned, you know a little bit into the model between cinemas and movies. What does that actually look like?
yeah. So yeah, it's a great point because everyone hears that they hear the numbers 155 million and
Mhm.
174 million, and then they hear like it only cost 50 million to make. But Hollywood and I guess the movie industry, its model is slightly different and not as clear cut as people might think. So a lot of it is, well, no, I wouldn't say a lot of it. A large part of it, I'd say, is ticket sales, and I'll talk about how those are broken down. But the rest of it is really comes down to media distribution, merchandise, things like streaming later down the line, licensing, that sort of thing, and those things like with Barbie, for example. I would love to understand how they worked with the brand itself, and they mentioned Mattel a lot in the movie. They mentioned the brand a lot, whether it was a sort of licensing deal that they put in place. But generally, once a movie comes out, and it differs from country to country, right? Most movies come from Hollywood, so the US is like the first like port of call, and the studios take around 60% of the first, like the film's initial ticket sales for a certain amount of time. It depends. Again, it depends on the movie, depends on the deals that they've got with the theaters. But they take a large chunk for the first part, which is the opening weekend, the
Mhm.
opening week, whatever it is, because that's where a majority of the money is going to be made. And then they take a smaller cut further down the line for as long as the movie is in theaters, and that's basically to help hedge a bad weekend. So if a movie costs 50 million to make and they only make 25 on the first opening weekend, the production company will get 60% of that to hedge, to kind of like cover their backs a little bit. Well, they'll still take a massive loss, but cover their backs a little bit more. And then further on, they'll get a smaller percentage of the movie's poorer takings over the latter parts of its life cycle. So the model is quite interesting in that regard. The theaters themselves have a different model as to how they make money off the back of that, but the kind of percentage cuts from the studios to the theaters is kind of broken down in that way.
That's cool. That's interesting. Something I've never really taken the time to research into. And you always think, how do these production companies in Hollywood have such deep pockets to keep on producing
Mm,
movies? And yeah, there's some interesting cases like Paranormal Activity, which I think came out in around 2009 or 10. If you remember
mm,
that,
yeah, yeah.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think they had a ridiculously small budget. It was under something like $10,000, but because and it was literally just like a guy recording it in his house with a few
Yeah.
webcams, but then they just like creamed it, and then the movies just went down after three or so. But I think they finished at Paranormal Activity 5. But you see a completely startling, contrasting, contrarian view as to how people have done it there, which is, yeah, really interesting to know that's the model there. Um, so I appreciate you sharing those insights and figures. So for our next section of the podcast, which is a fellow entrepreneur, we've got a question from someone we vaguely know. So this is a friend of a friend.
Yep.
And this is what the question reads. And if, for those of you who haven't listened to this section, what we do is we take questions in from guests, people we know who are running businesses or are looking to become nomadic business owners or just essentially entrepreneurs. And we dissect how we think you could approach or they could approach this question. So the question reads this: it's summertime and I've seen a slowdown in sales. I run a small apparel e-com brand. Sales have significantly slowed down and I'm a little apprehensive as to what to do with my budget and planning. How would you approach my situation? Erald, thoughts?
Yeah. No, this is a great question, and we know this person vaguely, so I've had some conversations with them as well about this, and here's something to consider. Like the movies, like anything, seasonality can impact your business massively. And summertime, when people are traveling more, and people are maybe paying less attention to e-com, depending on the type of industry you're in. Because if you're an AC business right now, you're probably doing very well. But if you're an AC business during December, you're probably not doing so great. So what do you do to get around that? If you're an apparel business and perhaps you don't have a summer collection or something like that, then looking at re-engaging with your current audience or people that have bought from you before. So if people have bought in the springtime and summer's coming up and you have something to offer them for the summer, then you can hit them back with, I don't know, a shorts campaign or a t-shirts campaign. I know this brand does do those things. So for them, it would be like, all right, let's see if we can reactivate via SMS, via email. Can we do some retargeting as well, if need be? And can you get the audience that you've got that care about your brand outside of the summer, maybe to re-engage and build some uh, even if it's just building a bit of a buzz, right? If it's like running a reactivation campaign on social media to try and get people to know about you and expanding the audience, that would probably be the best port of call. And then look at Q4, and I think this is something that we both agree on, Joe, as well. Like in periods where things are quieter, look to the next sort of like signpost for to really get ready for that. So if it's the Black Friday sales, or if it's going to be, if Halloween's a big thing for your brand, or if it's even planning for Christmas coming up to like September, October, then I'd start looking at that. But where would you start, Joe, with this?
You've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. So I think there's two perspectives to look at. You've got your and this is, I think, so to strip it back a layer further, I think conventional business school textbook strategy teaches you to think about the long run. But fundamentally, most people who are probably listening to this podcast do not have deep enough pockets where they will be content month to month, where they have run rate for the next 12 to 24 months. We know fantastic business owners who have raised financing, who have raised investment,
Yeah.
and we see what impact it has on their business, how astute you have to be with every penny. And it's rarely until you probably hit the multi-million pound mark where you can really start to turn around and say, actually, we've got some padding, let's slow down. Most businesses, in my opinion, that there's a lot of businesses that fundamentally they're doing well revenue wise, they're making an okay amount of profit, but a lot of what founders do is they eat last. And this is something that my mentor mentioned to me before, is quite often founders need to be thinking about eating first. And when you're running a business and every day is different and you're trying to adapt your business strategy and plan, there's two things that we think of. And as you've rightly pointed out, is focusing on reactivating your current audience, engaging them, building community-based relations. So some really cool concepts I've seen recently are businesses inviting a cohort of their best customers to visit them in their offices, or essentially driving an incubator session. So using that time to plan for the future. When I say the future, I'm talking about is what you've said, the next 3 to 6 months, recording UGC content, preparing content which is ready for the busier periods. And time again, we've seen campaigns where we're working with clients, we'll send them out Black Friday forms 6 weeks beforehand to get everything ready.
Yeah.
And they're essentially scratching their noses and they get these things sorted a week beforehand, which is not ideal. And it's the Abraham Lincoln quote of give me 8 hours to chop down a tree. I'll use 6 of them sharpening the axe. And I think quite conventionally, a lot of business owners are so reactive that they haven't planned for growth and maintain cycles. And it's staggering to me how often I see business owners, and this isn't saying this in a patronizing way because I've been in these vicarious cycles myself with my
For sure.
agency and coaching business, but I see we put out a roadmap, we put out a plan, but we let emotion affect us while we're going through there. And if we knew what would happen on the other side, it's similar to people going through a 16-week gym transformation. We know if we start cutting our calories and we stop eating carbohydrates and do the right things and lift weights and just go for 45 minutes of intense walks every single day, we will lose weight. But it's the
Yeah.
bridge in between. So I would say, from not just a business perspective, but for the person who's written in here, is to disattach emotion and to look to view this in a more rational and stoic perspective. I think you've covered everything else, Harold.
Yeah, no, I think you expanded on it much better, Joe. So appreciate that, and I think you're spot on. Another thing is when it comes to the planning stage, and a lot of businesses not you don't want to have a sort of like reductive mind state of I want to plan for failure. But if you know you have quiet periods, and this brand is quite new, so figuring out what your quiet periods actually are is maybe tough as well. But if there are quieter periods where you know you have 3 months, 4 months of much lower sales, then having the budget, like having the funding or the money in the bank to kind of float that is important, because you don't want to run into the issue of like, okay, we're going to throw money at the issue to try and fix the top of the funnel issue of getting people in, and then draining everything, and then when you actually are busy, not have anything to double down on. Because I think it's actually better to double down on the times where you are doing really well, as a if it's an econ brand. If you're like you've got a period where it's very busy, double down on that than it is to double down on times where you know it's going to be quiet and you're just trying to get back to baseline. You get way less ROI, I think, trying to do that, trying to return to normal, than it is to double down on when it's busy. Striking while the iron's hot, right? Like a lot of people say. So yeah, I think those are really great tips, Joe. I think for this person, they have a brand that will still do okay during the summer. But for a lot of brands that don't have that, like have a very strong seasonality, just think about what the next 3 months, 3 to 6 months looks like. What can you do right now to build some of those relationships, build that content, get that stuff ready for the busier times, and I think you'll see a really great, yeah, a really great outcome from having those plans in place than it is worrying too much about what's going on and letting emotion dictate your situation too much, as Joe said.
Similar to the point about Barbie have been sharpening the axe for the last however long. They've been
Yeah,
sharpening the axe for decades. And now, I don't even know how old Barbie is as a brand, but I know girls when I was a kid had Barbie dolls, and I'm sure people older than us did. But they've released a movie now. You knew fundamentally that Barbie would be a success based on their brand, based on their name. And equally, most 99.9% of businesses cannot think at the scale of Barbie. However,
mm,
if we think about building an audience now and fostering relations, even if it would be a case of turning around and speaking to key influencers, and these don't have to be upscale influencers, these could be micro influencers, building those relationships and seeing what could be done there, or even looking at their audience and thinking about how they could use them as a viral coefficient, so to speak, to grow their brand from that perspective. So that's kind of a full circle interloop of what we mentioned at the start.
absolutely. And you raise a good point as well. Like the idea of a trend too is incredibly impactful. So seasonality impacts things the same way trends do. So Barbie and Oppenheimer are big right now. And I'm not saying to jump on the Barbie Oppenheimer train, but if you have a unique enough angle, then you can use that to your advantage. So if this brand has a bunch of pink outfits that they could formulate into some sort of like outfit for the cinema to go and watch Barbie or something of the sort, then you could definitely use that. And hopping on those trends, if there are quiet periods, but there's a trend that you can like kind of ride the wave of, then absolutely worth going for that.
And a bit of a guilty confession, but today I was in McDonald's. I was in
Mm,
between trains, so I can be forgiven for not having the best meals. But one thing that I noticed McDonald's do fantastically well is, and again, big brand, there's no uh, there's no reason why smaller brands can't reinvent what bigger brands are doing.
yeah,
Is
for sure.
take the McFlurry, for instance. McDonald's get basic ice cream, the cheapest ice cream you can probably get on the market. And what do? When it's Christmas, they put different chocolates, different flavorings. When it's Christmas, they go really hard on Sundays. When it's around Easter, they put Easter eggs in there.
Mm-hmm.
McFlurries. When it's Halloween, they put orange treats in it. They're so clever. They do this with burgers. When they have the Texas range, they have a teriyaki range. They have all of these different meals that they make exclusive. They make scarce amongst seasons. And equally, if you're coming in, and this is what I've advised for clients before, if you're coming into a quiet season, think about what you can do to increase scarcity in your products. The conventional approach that brands go for is sales.
Yeah.
And I think that's very limited. If people know systematically that come July, you're going to be slashing prices because you just want revenue, well, in those months leading up before then, people are going to hold out. That there's always a joke. Every year, parents say, I'm going to buy my Christmas presents in January. That doesn't work because
Yeah.
most people are broke once January comes, and ultimately, they're not bothered about thinking about Christmas the next year ahead in January. Certainly, I'm not. But I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
looking at it from a different lens and thinking of how you can spin your products, how you can spin your brand based on what works. Alex Harmozy mentioned something really interesting about a fur coat business that he worked in. Fur coats massively seasonal. So he mentioned that within this business, they would be really big within, say, autumn and winter, and then come spring and summer, they slow down in sales. So what do? They essentially sold them insurance. They said you can leave your jackets in our warehouse over X period of time, and you can come back, we'll deliver it to you. That's a really quick and easy way of them turning around and saying, hey, you've got this expensive product that you bought off us. Well, evidently you want to keep it with us. And they gave them a reason to give it to them because they said, if you pay us, I think they were talking about fur coats that range from $3,000 all the way up to $30,000. And they would charge $250 to keep it over there over a season. And the
Yeah.
way how they frame it is, if you leave your jackets with us, then essentially the shelf life of how long you keep that jacket for would be longer. So that's just one example of how businesses can think about adapting to seasonality, market trends. I know we both do it within our agencies.
Yep.
We can see so many case studies where businesses do it well. And I think, I don't know, personally know this person, you've just told me about them, and we've looked at their brand once together. But I think based on what this brand's doing, the classic, you've got the box. How do you think outside of it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny you raised that fur business example from Alex Hormozy because I was actually thinking about it today, and I think another thing they did was they would do like a cleaning every summer. So it's like you've worn it hard during the winter. We're going to clean it. We're going to look after it. We're going to keep it in an air conditioned room so that it maintains the quality, and giving them those sorts of those value adds that they might not
Mm-hmm.
have considered otherwise. But also it's a revenue source for an apparel brand. Now it's difficult because it's like, well, what do you do for? You can't just say to people that you're going to store their clothes, but you could either find a low ticket item that might like fit in, like t-shirts or vests or socks, things that during the summer are more popular, or you could find some way just to engage with the audience, which is jumping on a trend like Barbie or Oppenheimer. So I think a lot of those elements that you've mentioned, Joe, are a great way for this brand and brands like it as well. Other entrepreneurs that are running apparel brands that are thinking about how to get through a quieter summer period, uh, use that. I'd also say just to attach onto that, if it's quieter now, start looking at your website, your funnels, your conversion rate. What can you do actually to your digital presence to start leveraging higher sales? Because now's your time. You're not caught up with all the day to day of like having to fulfill orders and talk to customers and deal with the team. It's like, okay, you're quieter now. Where do you put your energy? Let's actually look at the stuff that has been working well. Can we tweak it? Can we optimize it? And what hasn't been working well? Can we cut it or can we redo it? I'd also say that's one thing to add to the list as well that we've not mentioned.
Growth and maintain cycles. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Lovely. Well, Erald, thanks for your time. It was always a pleasure as we jump on these podcasts. And I'll leave it over to you to outro us.
Yeah, no, thanks, Joe. For anyone that's been listening, I definitely urge you to send in your questions. As we mentioned, our inboxes, our social medias are open. Head over there. Obviously, follow us and subscribe if you want to keep in touch with us about our own personal business journeys and other entrepreneurs like yourselves to see how they're getting through these challenges. And if there's anyone that has a question that they would like to send over for us to dissect in more detail, or a business, then please do send that through as well. We're open to talking to different guests. We're going to have some guests coming up very soon as well in the next few episodes. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, big thank you to the audience for listening. We're going to see you soon, we hope. Going to keep up the consistency, Joe, and post way more often. So expect to see our faces on your timelines and Spotify, Apple Music accounts, whatever it is that you're listening to us on, your iPod shuffles. And we'll catch you soon.
Have a happy day, people. Adios.
You too. Cheers.